and I've scored very well on all the math sections. And so we've actually had this SAT class before, a few months ago. It went really well. Lots of people joined. And so this is our second time we're doing the class again for a new batch. And so how this class is going to work is I'm going to have a problem up on the board. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to solve the problem. And then I'm going to go step by step on how to solve the problem and the kind of information you will need to solve these types of problems. That is the general idea of how these classes are going to go.
And we
So,
generally promote you as panelists. So if you want, you can interact, and if you have questions, you can always ask the instructor.
okay, so this is our first question. So I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to solve it, and then I'm going to explain how you'd actually do it using the whiteboard. So this is the whiteboard. Okay, so for this first question, we're given the function defined as h of x is equal to negative 1 over 4 x minus 2. And so this equation is given in the format of y equals mx plus b. M is the slope and b is the y-intercept. And so in this case, the y-intercept would be negative 2. And so on these graphs, um, A has a y-intercept of positive 2, B has an intercept of positive 2, C has an intercept of negative 2, and D has an intercept of negative 2. So it can only be C or D. And then for um, the slope of this is negative 1/4. So the answer for this would be answer choice D. Okay, question number 2. Oh, yes, and all these SATs we take during these classes are official SATs that have been given before in the past. So some of these might be a little bit easier, some of them might be a little bit harder, but these are all official SATs that have been taken by students. Okay, so for this one, we're given the equation x squared plus 10 equals 91, and it asks us for the positive solution to the given equation, and so we just have to solve for x. So we would subtract 10 for both sides, which gets us x squared equals 81. And then to find the what x is, we have to take the square root of both sides. So square root of x squared, square root of 81, and x equals positive or negative 9. And for this one, it asks, what is the positive solution? So the positive solution would be 9. If it asks for the negative solution, it would be negative 9. And so you ask, why is there a positive and a negative solution for this? Well, if you do 9 squared, you'd get 81 plus 10 equals 91. If you do negative 9 squared, you'd also get 81 plus 10 equals 91. And the reason why is the negative times the negative becomes a positive. So that's why when you take the square root of something, you have to do plus or minus. And for this one, it only asks us for the positive solution, so it's just positive 9. So answer choice A. Okay, question 3. Okay, so for this one, we have a similar thing where we have to find the value of x. And so for this one, the main thing we have to do is distribute. So 3 times x becomes 3x, and 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. And so all I did there was I distributed this 3 into the x and into the negative 3. So we get 3x minus 9 equals x plus 7. And then you'd subtract x from both sides. So you get 7 equals 3x minus this x here, which gets us 2x minus 9, because this just goes down. And then you'd add 9 to both sides, which gets us 16 equals 2x. Divide both sides by 2, and you get 8 equals x, which is answer choice B. Okay, question 4. This one's also pretty easy.
If anyone has any questions, they can always raise their hand in between so that he can answer.
Okay, so for this one, we have to use the same equation we used for question number 1, y equals mx plus b. Y is still y. For the slope, we're given m is the slope, so the slope is 1, so just be 1x, and 1x is just simplified into x plus, and we're given, it passes through the point 0, 2. So when x is 0, y is 2, which means that the y-intercept is 2, so b is 2. So we have y equals x plus 2, which is answer choice C. This one was pretty easy. All right, question 5. Okay, so for question 5, we're given that there's two different types of currencies. There's P, which is worth 1, and there's G, which is worth 10p, essentially. Because it says each G is worth 10 of the P's each. We're just going to since P is equal to 1, it would be 10 times 1, so each G is worth 10. And so it asks which equation represents the number of P and G, which have a combined value of 85. So combined value means that P plus the value of P, which is 1, plus the value of G, which is 10. So 10G has to equal 85. If it asks us for the number of coins, it would be P plus G equals whatever the number of coins would be, which would be C, I guess. But in this case, it asks us for the value, which would be the value of P, which is just 1, plus the value of G, which is 10 times G, equals 85, which is answer choice B. Okay, question 6. Okay, so for this one, we're given an equation, 1 over x plus 1 over 2x, and we're told to turn this into one equation, or just one, sort of one of these. And so we can't actually add two fractions that have dissimilar denominators. So this has x in the denominator and this has 2x, so you can't actually add these. So what we have to do is we have to multiply this first part by 2. So for example, if you have 1 over 2, this is the same thing as saying it's 2 over 4. If you multiply both the top and the bottom by the same number, it still gives you the same thing. So that we just have to apply that here. So here we would have 2 over 2x, and then this right side stays the same. So plus 1 over 2x. And so 2 plus 1 equals 3 over, and the denominator stays the same. So 3 over 2x. So the answer choice here would be C. Okay, question 7.
There's someone who has put it in the chat that they don't know this at all.
Don't worry, I'm gonna go over it. Just give me a little bit. This one, I'm gonna give you a little bit more time on this one because this one's a little bit more challenging. So on here on the board, I have currently written down the circle equation. So we have, I'll go over it in a minute. I'm gonna give you a little bit more time. Okay, so for this one, this is our first slightly difficult one. So the first thing we need to actually know for this is the basic circle equation. And so the basic circle equation is x minus h squared, all this in parentheses squared, plus y minus k squared equals the radius squared. And so r is the radius, okay? H is the x value of the center of the circle, and k is the y value of the center of the circle. And so we need to transform this equation, x squared minus 10x plus y squared plus 6y equals 2. So we need to turn that into this other equation. I wrote this way too small. You probably cannot read that. Let me write that. X squared minus 10x plus y squared plus 6y equals 2. Okay, so we need to turn these into this. And so how do we get, so first let's just divide up the x variables and the y variables. And so we have x squared minus 10x. So we need to get into form x minus h squared. So how do we do that? Well, x plus what times x plus what equals, we have to get that to equal negative 10x. And so what would that be? That would be x plus 5 and x plus 5. No, sorry, it would be x minus 5. So x minus 5 times x minus 5 gives us x squared. We have x times negative 5, which is negative 5x. And then we have x times negative 5, which gives us negative 5x. And we have negative 5 times negative 5, which gives us 25. And so this, if we apply this to this, we get x minus 5 squared, but we have an additional 25 we added to here. And so what we'd have to do, because we have this remainder of 25, to get this negative 10 to cancel out, we had to do x minus 5, but x minus 5 squared gives us an additional 25, so we have to add 25 to the other side of the equation. So we'd have to do 2 225 plus 25. 2 plus 25, because we have this 2 here. And then we have to do the same thing for the y. And so for the y, we have y squared plus 6y. And so when you divide that up, when you divide 6 by 2, you get 3. So this would just be y plus 3 and y plus 3. So this gives us y squared, 3y, 3y, and 9. So y squared, 3y plus 3y is 6y. So that gives us this, y squared plus 6y. And you have a remainder of 9. And so this would be y plus 3 squared. And then you'd have to add 9 to the right. So plus 9. And so we have x minus 5 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals 25. 27 plus 9 is 36. And once we take the square root of that, it's just 6 squared. So, using that, the center is negative h. So the center would be 5, because this already has the negative. And negative k, here it's positive. So this would be the opposite of, so negative 3. So the center is at 5, negative 3, and the radius would be 6. And so the correct answer here would be C. The center would be at 5, negative 3, and the radius, which it doesn't ask for, but it would be 6. Now, great. Now, easier way to do this would just be, instead of having to figure all that out, you could just do 10 divided by 2, and you get just that x minus 5, and then you just have to do 5 squared and add it to the right. And for here, it's just the 6 divided by 2, so that's y plus 3. And then you'd have to do 3 squared, so you just add 9 to the right. You don't have to do all this adding for this problem in particular because it never asks for the radius. But for a question that does ask for the radius, you would have to add all that. So the main thing was just transforming this equation they gave into the circle formula.
So there's someone typing in the chat, they're telling they got some other answer or something.
5, 3. Okay, let me put it in Desmos and I can show you. X squared minus 10x. So x squared minus 10x plus y squared plus 6y. So plus y squared equals 2.
Someone is asking, what is the concept called?
Okay. So I plugged the equation into a graphing calculator. Okay. This is the same question. X squared minus 10x plus y squared plus 6y equals 2. X squared minus 10x plus y squared plus 6y equals 2. It's the same one. And so the center is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and negative 2. Or 5, negative 3, which would be right here. So it is actually 5, negative 3. It is not 5, positive 3. I think what you might have done is you might have either dropped the negative here for the y squared equation, or for here, instead of y minus k, you might have thought this was y plus k. You could have also made that mistake. I'm not sure where you got the extra negative from. But The answer is C. Perhaps you could tell me where. Because what you might have done is, when you were taking this y squared plus 6y, you might have dropped the negative. Or here you might have thought this was y plus k. Or you might have also thought that it was minus here, x minus h squared minus y minus k, which would have also given you 5 positive 3. So you could have made those two mistakes. Okay, question 8. And so what this was this was just the circle formula. That was the main thing. It was just the circle formula. Okay, question 8. If there's any questions on question 7, you can write in chat. Okay, so for this one, we get 2 equations. And so there's 2 ways we can solve this. We can either set these equal to each other, or we can draw a graph. I prefer drawing a graph because it's, I don't know, kind of easier. And also maybe not, maybe a bit more visual, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so the first one we have y is greater than 4x. So when x is 0, y is greater than 0. When x is 1, y is greater than 4. So that'll be like this. And then when x is like -1, y is greater than -4. So the line would be like this. And y would be, I should use a different color. That. And y is greater than that. So it would be everything to the left. So all of this to the left of 1. And for the other one, we're given y is less than -x. So when x is 0, y is 0. When x is 1, y is less than -1. So this is like 1, 1. This is on. So this would be the other line. And for this one, colors would be like this. It's basically asking us, where do these two intersect? Which one of these points is inside the intersection? And so if we go to 1, 1, it is not. So this would not be inside it. So it can't be answer choice A. For answer choice B, -2, -2 is inside of it. So the answer choice would, the correct answer is B. But let's check the others. For C, we have 3, -3. So 3, -3 would actually be on the line, which is not one of the answers because it says y is less than -x. If it said y is less than or equals to -x, then it could be on the line. But in this case, it's not. And also it wouldn't be the right answer because it doesn't fit the other equation. And for the last one, we have -4, 4, which doesn't fit because it's not on the line. So the correct answer is B. The other way you could solve this is you could set these two equal to each other. So, and then you can find what values of x would have to be greater and equals to. But that strategy is, in my opinion, harder to do. Okay, question 9. Okay, so with this one, we're given the equation h equals 150 plus 10t. And so basically, this is the same thing as y equals mx plus b, except they swap these two. This is basically the same thing as h equals 10t plus 150. And so 150 is the initial value, 10 is the slope. So the slope is basically how many housing units are added every month. And so that is what it asks for. It says how many housing units are added to the community each month after the zoning law was passed. And so that would just be the slope, which is 10. So that means the answer here would be A. Okay, question 10. Okay, so for this one, you basically have to just turn this into one equation without all the parentheses and all that. And so for this one, you could distribute this negative in your head, but typically if you make a mistake, you'll get it wrong. So I would prefer doing this on paper. So we have 2x squared plus 3x minus 2. And we have to distribute this negative because this negative is just basically like plus -1 times this. So we just distribute that -1. So we have minus 5x squared, and then -1 times -x becomes plus x, and then -1 times -7 becomes plus 7. And then we just have 2x squared minus 5x squared gives us -3x squared. 3x plus x equals 4x. -2 plus 7 is plus 5. So that gives us answer choice D. Okay, question 11. Yes, it is. The last question was answer choice D. Okay, question 11. If you had gotten B for the last one, well, if you'd gotten B, you'd have to get positive 3x squared, which I'm not sure how you got. Because once you distribute this negative onto the 5x squared, you'd get -5x squared, right? And so 2x squared minus 5x squared is -3x squared. Let's just say you have like 2 minus 5. That would give you -3. So I don't know how you got positive 3. Okay, anyway, question 11. Okay, so this one we're given the equation y equals x minus 1, x plus 1, and x plus 2. And we're told the graph in the xy plane of the equation above contains the point AB. So A, comma, B. A is the x value, B is the y value. If -1, 2, 1 is the equation of is the answer for A. So A can be so it can be 1 comma B or -1 comma B. It can be 0.1 comma B or whatever. A can be anything from -1 to 1. It can be anywhere from -1 to 1. Which of the following is not a possible value for B? Okay, so for this one, the easiest way, there are a lot of ways to do this one. Most of them are quite difficult. So we're gonna just use the easiest way right now. So the easiest way, which I found, was plugging in. So since it says it can also equal these n values, I just plugged in. So if you plug in 1 and -1, you'd get 0. So it can't be answer choice C. And then if you plug in 0, because 0 is between -1 and 1, then you'd get an answer choice of -2. Because if you plug in 0, you'd have -1 times +1, and then you'd have times 2. So -1 times 2, which is just -2. So -2 is a possible value for B. So it can't be answer choice A. So now you're left with answer choice B and answer choice D, which is -1 and 1. And so narrowing between these two, I'm not sure what strategy you're supposed to use. The way I solved this was I had to integrate this, which I don't think you all know how to do. But okay, main thing is that this graph is, since there's 3 x values, x times x would be x squared, and then x squared times x is x cubed. So an x cubed graph always looks like this, okay? Where x squared is like a u, and then x cubed is like a curve like that. And so since there is no negative behind the x, this curve would be like this. If this was like negative x minus 1, then the curve would be like this. And so using that principle, we can narrow down that the answer choice here has to be answer choice D. Because if it's like this, and if the points where it hits 0 are here, here, and here, then it can't ever be positive here between -1 and +1. But that's just based on this principle. The other way you could solve it is if you integrate the equation, which I don't, that sounds quite difficult. I'm not sure what topic this is called exactly, but this is what the graph would look like. Let me zoom in. So so when you plug in -1, you get 0. When you plug in +1, you get 0. And when you plug in 0, you get -2. And as you can see, from -1 to oh wait, I just realized. Wait, this is a lot simpler than I thought. If at -1 it's 0, if at +1 it's 0, and if at 0 it's at -2, then if this is a continuous graph, at some point it has to pass -1, either here or here. It has to pass -1 at some point. So the only answer it could be is +1. So you don't actually need to worry about that. This is actually a lot more simple than I thought. Because when you plug in 1 and -1, you get 0 and 0. And since you plug in 0, you get -2. It means that if this is a continuous graph, it has to pass -1 at some point. Like it could be like this, or the graph could look like this, something, and this, but no matter what, it always has to pass -1 between 0 and -2. So never mind, this problem was actually a lot easier than I thought. It's just for question 11, what I was saying was basically like, if you have a straight line and this is like negative, like this is like -1, like 3, and this is like, I don't know, 1, like 5 or something, or -5, I guess, then at some point it would have to pass this point here or this point here. So that was basically the logic I used for last one. I made it a lot more difficult than I had to. But still, there's lots of ways to solve all these problems. I was making it way too complicated. Okay, so this one for question 12, all we need to know is the volume formula, which it is actually given on the SAT. So if you look at the SAT, when you actually go up, they actually give you all the formulas you would need for volume and area questions on the very first page. So this is the very first page. And they give you all the formulas you would need. And so I just got this from here. Volume equals 4/3 pi r cubed. Or you could just have that memorized. It'll be faster if it's memorized, but if not, you are given it. And so this one, we have two beach balls are shaped in a sphere. We have one that has a diameter of 3x and the other one that has a diameter of x. What is the ratio of volume? So that's why we got the volume one. And so basically to get the radius, we just divide by the diameter by 2. So we'd have 3/2x. And for the other one, we would have x/2. And so since these are not going to be easy to square, so the best way to do it is to multiply both of these by 2, since we're only looking for a ratio. Since we're looking for a ratio, what we do to one, we can also do to the other. So if we just multiply by 2, we just get the diameter again. So we can just do 3x and x for the radius, or not for the radius, but this won't actually give us the correct answer for the volume, but it doesn't ask us for that. It only asks us for a ratio. So we don't have to worry about that. And so 3 cubed would be 3 times 3 is 9. times 3 is 27. So we have 27, and then this is basically 1x, so 1 cubed would just be 1. So it's 27 to 1 is the ratio. Because this 4 over 3 pi is going to stay the same no matter what you do. These are all constants, they never change. So the only thing that's changing is the radius. And since we're looking for a ratio, we can use easier numbers. If we were asked to find the actual volume of them, then you'd have to work with finding the cube root of like 3 over 2, which is not, they wouldn't ever ask you to do that without a calculator at least. Okay, question 13. Okay, so this one, the easiest way to solve it is plug in x equals 0 and x equals 1. For most of these questions, plugging in these two numbers will give you the answer for the graph. And so let's try it. If you plug in x equals 0, you get y equals 2 times 3 to the 0th power. 3 to the 0th power is 1, so it would just be 2 times 1, which is 2. So when x is 0, y is equal to 2. And so that matches graphs A and graph D. Graph B and C have different. This value is not on graphs B and C, so it can't be B or C. And for the second one, if we plug in x equals 1, we would get 2 times 3 to the first power. Anything to the first power is just itself. So this is just 2 times 3, which is just 6. And so it would be 1 comma 6. So when x is 1, y is 6. And so which of one of these graphs matches that? Well, for graph D, we have 0, 2 and 1, 4, so it can't be graph D. And for graph A, we have 0, 2 and 1, 6, which match the 2 points. So the answer for 13 is A. And like 99% of the time, if you plug in 0 and 1 for these type of exponential equations, they generally work. If you're, at least if you're trying to find out which graph works. Not always, but if that happens, then you just have to plug in a little few more values, like -1 and +2 and stuff like that, and then you usually get those answers too. Because these graph ones are typically very easy to just plug in for. Okay, question 14. Okay, this one's incredibly easy. We have a graph. It asks us which of the following is the value of x for which f of x is equal to 0. f of x is basically the same thing as y. So for which value of x is y equal to 0? At -1, y is equal to like just below 6 slightly. And then at 0, it's equal to 4. At 1, it's equal to 0. So the correct answer here would be C. And then at 4, it's equal to some very large number, which it doesn't even show us on the graph. So the correct answer for this one would be C. At x equals 1, y is equal to 0. Okay, question 15. So someone said for the last equation, for the last question, they got D. Okay, let me check. Okay, so for question 14, it says the graph of function f is shown. Which of the following is a value of x? So these are x values for which f of x is equal to 0. So f of x means y. So which of these x values gives us a y value of 0? So when x is equal to 4, y is equal to a very large number, because these are x values. These are not y values. What you might have thought is these are y values, in which case when y equals 4, x is equal to 0. But these are actually x values, which are the following value of x. Anyway, back to question 15. I assume most of you were almost finished with this. Okay, so for this one, it's kind of a complex formula, but not really. So the starting value, so the starting number of water Hackianths or whatever is 12. That is the initial number. And you can figure that out because when t is equal to 0, you have 2 to the 0th power, which is just 1. So the starting number is 12. So that is what the 12 is. And so what is the 2 times t over 6? So what exactly is this one? That is what is asking. And so so what this value is this is the doubling time. This is the doubling time formula. So when t is equal to 0, it's obviously 1, which is the initial. When t is equal to 6, we have 6 over 6, which is 1. So 2 to the first power is 2. And so 2 times the initial, or the base, which is in this case 12, would be double the initial population. So in 6 days, the initial population doubled, which is answer choice B. And if you want to prove it again, let's use a number other than 6. Let's use 12. Because in 12, it should double from this again. So when you have 12 over 6, you have 2 squared. So 2 squared would give us 4. 12 times 4. So when t increased by 6, it went from 24 to double that, 48. So this means that the number of water Heikians doubled every 6 days. That is what this formula means. And so if this number was like a 3 here instead of a 2, it would basically be the number of them tripled every 6 days. And if this number was like from 6, it went down to like 4, then it would be like the number of whatever water things tripled every 4 days. And so the t over a number, let's just use x for this example, t over whatever this number is the amount of time for it to double or triple or whatever. And then whether or not it's a double or triple or whatever depends on the number here. If it's 2, then it's double. If it's 3, then it's triple. If it's 4, then it's quadruple, etc., etc. And then the very number in front is the base, which is the initial population. And there's a problem loading. Okay, give me a minute. Let me just reload the page. If you're in 10th grade and you haven't learned it, you're fine. You still have quite some time to learn it. Okay, so now we're on to the FRQ questions. So algebra 2 is for seniors and juniors. Yeah, I think you should be fine if you haven't learned some of this stuff. It depends. Some schools offer, like I'm in Calc BC, and I took algebra in 8th grade. It depends. Some schools offer it really early. Some schools offer it later on. You should be fine. Okay, but now we're on to the FRQ questions. So there's no multiple choice answers. We're going to start with question 16. Because I did end up doing a lot of stuff over summer so I can skip a lot of math classes. So that's why I'm taking Calc BC right now in 12th. The only thing I can say is I would recommend trying to learn this before 12th grade because you do have time to take the SAT one more time in 12th. I would recommend taking it in 11th, but I would recommend knowing all this stuff before 12th grade starts. because you start your college applications, but you have to finish them by mid-year in 12th. So I would recommend knowing most of this before 12th grade starts. Okay, so for this one, we have 4t minus 8t equals 12h. We just have to get t by itself, so we just add 8d to both sides. 4t equals 12h plus 8d, and then you divide everything by 4. T equals 3h plus 2d. And what is the value of a? AD, so that's 3. So the answer of question 16 is, wait. Yeah. Okay, question 17. Oh, wait, hold on. For question 16, I did the wrong number. It's AD. So we take this, so it's 2. And it's BH. Sorry, it would be 2. Yeah, because it's AD, not AH. Yeah. Okay. 16 is 2. Let me just check. Yeah, it is 2. Okay, question 17. Okay, so for this one, we're given an quadrilateral ABCD. And so it asks us to find the perimeter. Well, to find the perimeter, we would have to find the length of these two sides here. And they should be equal to each other. And the reason why we know that is because we're told that BC is parallel and AB is equal to CD. So these two are equal to the same thing. And so to find this, well, since we know, or I definitely did not draw this to scale, but whatever. Since we know that this top part is 10, since this line is in the middle, we can say that this is 5 on the left and 5 on the right, because that adds up to 10. And we can do the same thing for the bottom. Instead of 26, we can say 13 and 13. because 13 plus 13 is 26, and 5 plus 5 is equal to 10. And so why would we want to do this? Well, we want to make a triangle here. And so we want to make this triangle right here. And so for that triangle, this is just the left half of this parallelogram. So we know that this is 6, this is 5, and this entire thing is 13. Well, to find how much this is, we do 13 minus 5, which is 8. And so that means that this part here is 8, and this part here is 5. 8 plus 5 is equal to 13, which is the total. And this 5 is equal to this 5 up here. And we bring this 6 over to the left. And so now we have a triangle with size 8 and 6. And now we use the formula a squared plus b squared equals c squared geometry. So 8 squared is 64 plus 6 squared is 36 equals c squared. So 100 is equal to c squared. So this last side length has to be equal to 10. So now that we know that, that means that this is equal to 10 and this is equal to 10 because they're equal to each other. And so now we just add everything up. So we have the 10 from the top plus the 10 from the left side plus the 10 from the right side plus the 26 from the bottom gets us 30 plus 26. So that's 56 as the perimeter. Okay, question 18. Also, a lot of SAT questions look a lot harder than they actually are. I have made that mistake many times on the SAT. I overcomplicate a lot of questions. A lot of them are a lot easier than they should be, if I'm being honest. Or at least a lot easier than they look like. Okay, so for this one, This is based on the quadratic formula. This is something you have to memorize. They do not give this on the test, but there are a lot of FRQ FRQ questions that require this formula. This is an example of one of them. They don't give this equation, but you have to memorize this. I made the mistake of not memorizing this earlier for my first few SATs, but then I eventually had to learn it. Make sure you memorize the quadratic formula. So quadratic formula is ax squared plus bx plus c, which is the base form. And then to find the value of x, you do negative b plus or minus root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That is the quadratic formula. And so for this one, we're given the equation x squared minus 2x minus 1 equals 0. And so we know that a is equal to 1, because there's basically like a 1x squared, which is basically the same thing as x squared. We know that b is equal to negative 2. And then c is equal to negative 1. And now we just plug in. So, yeah. So negative 2 plugged into negative b. Oh, I'm just gonna have to write all this down. Negative 2 plus or minus root negative 2 squared minus 4. A is just 1. C is negative 1. All over. A is just 1, so all over 2. We don't need this anymore. Negative 2 becomes 2 plus or minus negative. All right, let's try the square root. Negative 2 squared is 4 minus, okay, and then negative 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. So 4 minus negative 4. Make sure you remember the negative. This negative is here. Negative 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. These negatives cancel out, so this becomes a positive. So 4 plus 4 all over 2. So this is just root 4 plus 4 is 8. So this gets us 2 plus square root of 8 over 2. And now, since this format it gives is x plus root n and x minus root n, it means we have to get rid of this negative 2, which means we have to simplify this square root. So square root of 8 is equal to the square root of 4 times 2. Because 4 times 2 is 8. And so the square root of 4 times 2 is equal to the square root of 8. And then using our algebra or geometry principles, this is the same thing as square root of 4 times square root of 2. Square root of 4 is equal to 2. So that gives us 2 root 2. And so bringing all this up here, we have 2 plus or minus 2 root 2 over 2. And then these 2's cancel out. And then you're left with 1 plus or minus root 2. As answered, 1 plus or minus root 2. We're still not done yet, though. Because now, I have to do what they ask, which is n is equal to 1, n equals 1, and k is equal to 2, k equals 2. What is the value of n plus k? Which n plus k, 1 plus 2 is 3. So the answer is 3. This was one of the longer questions, if I'm being honest. The correct answer for this is 3. Yeah, this is one of the longer questions.
This will be the last question, okay? And then we'll end
Okay.
it.
Okay, so for this one, there's two ways to technically solve systems of equations. For this one, I'm going to use, I think it depends. For some problems, the other way is easier, but for this one, I'm going to show you one of the two ways. So you just subtract 4x from both sides to get, you just have to get one of the variables by itself. In this case, it's going to be y. So y equals 7, and then you subtract 4x from this. So you get y equals 7 minus 4x. And then you plug in to the other equation. There is another way to do this, which basically you subtract these two equations, but it's a bit complex. And for this question in particular, it's not going to work as well. I mean, it still will work, but it's going to be more difficult. So you just plug in 2x minus 7, and then instead of y, you plug in the other equation. So 7 minus 4x equals 1. 2x minus 49 minus or plus, because -7 times -4 is plus 28. X equals 1. 2x plus 28x is 30x minus 49 equals 1. Add 49 to both sides, and we get 30x equals 50. And now we do 50 over 30 equals x. And this question asks, what is the value of x? Well, 50 over 30, well, since there's a 0 on both, you can cross out the zeros. So that's 5 over 3. And so for this one, the accepted answers are 5 over 3, 1.66, or 1.67. In this case, it's generally easier to write fractions. So 5 over 3.
Okay, thank you everybody for joining us. We'll see you again next week on Sunday. Is this time okay, or do you want to reduce the time to an hour, or 1.5 hours is okay? Let us know. You can send us an email and let us know. It would be great, because if this is a longer time, we can reduce it to an hour. We'll see you again next week. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.